Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And today we have a very special guest indeed. As you can tell, we are joined by screenwriter and director Tom Mcloughlin. Tom, how are you today?
I'm good, very well, actually. It's been a good day so far. No ex-wives coming after me with lawsuits, and no dog bites. And everything's good.
Thank you so much for taking your time to join us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So obviously, primarily, I would say you're probably best known for being a director of quite widely regarded as the best Friday the 13th ever made, which is Friday the 13th Part 6.
It's a shock to me, I'll tell you. When we were making these things back in the 80s, all we were thinking is like, we're doing such dreck. This is not what we wanted to do as filmmakers. All the good stuff was being done in the 70s, with Godfather and Star Wars and Rocky. And I mean, there's so many, there's like great movies that were, influencing us young filmmakers and filmmakers to be. And as far as we were all concerned, there wasn't any great monsters other than Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, all of those, obviously from the 30s and 40s. And even, a few things from the sci-fi world in the 50s. But when we started doing this, it was sort of like, obviously John Carpenter started it with Halloween, and then Sean Cunningham said, well, gee, let's do another holiday, Friday the 13th. And then, of course, along came, Chucky and Hellraiser with Pinhead. And I mean, all these different monsters, which weren't really considered like that. We all believed, and I certainly did, by the time we got to Part 6, it was going to play in the theater 1 week, maybe two, and then be gone, forgotten, because, remember, these were before, VHS and beta, or obviously, DVDs or any of that. So nothing we thought was ever going to have a life beyond the movie theater. And it certainly wouldn't be shown on television. It was just too graphic. So here we are, almost 36 years later. And I just came back from a convention in Pennsylvania, and I'm treated like I made Frankenstein, like I, created one of the most iconic monsters of all time with Jason. The fact that I, put humor in it. And of course, that's because I couldn't take it seriously by the sixth one. So they were really good to me, that they really let me make the movie that I wanted to make. All they asked, the only marching orders I had was bring back Jason from the dead. We screwed up in Part 5. It wasn't Jason. Fans are upset, just bring him back and you can do anything else. So having that kind of creative control was obviously great fun. And it probably, of the 42 films that I've made, full-length feature films, was the most fun of all of them. But I never thought that was what my reputation was going to be forevermore, that was going to be it. So I've been working very hard. I've come up with a sequel, to mine that takes place in 1999. And then we've just created something really new, which is Jason's mother and her relationship with her young son, prior to Friday the 13th happening. And we're trying to get that in the works now that the lawsuit is finally kind of getting to those final stages where Sean and Victor just have to agree upon who gets how much money for this and how much for that, because they literally, the titles are like, things are split. Victor has Friday the 13th. He can call anything he wants Friday the 13th in America, but he can't in Europe. Sean can call it Friday the 13th in Europe. Victor cannot do a masked Jason, any place, but Sean can use the Jason thing, but he can't call it Friday the 13th. So if somebody wants to do a masked Jason called Friday the 13th, they've got to get both these guys to agree. And so I basically have, one movie that is the masked Jason, and the other that is what Sean owns, which is, the mother and the son, and Camp Crystal Lake and Friday the 13th. But still, having just spoke to Victor a few days ago, he can't talk about anything yet, as per the lawsuit, until all this red tape and deciding who gets what is decided. So, as he said, I hope I'm still alive when all this gets figured out. And I said, you will be, if I'm still kicking and going and making stuff, then I'm sure you are. And he's worked too hard on this lawsuit to give up now.
It truly just feels that this lawsuit has been going on for such a long time.
It
I
really
think
has.
everybody, both from the owners to fans to everyone in general, I think are just so ready for this to be finalized, and we can kind of bring back, I think one of the best franchises in horror history. And it's really interesting you said about the idea of sort of Jason's relationship with his mother, sort of pre sort of Friday the 13th. I actually did an interview with Deborah Voorhees about 2 months ago from Friday the 13th Part 5, and she actually said it would be such a cool idea if somebody did a movie where we got to sort Jason's relationship before this kind of Camp Crystal Lake incident happened. So it's really interesting that you kind of mentioned that.
I'm very, very excited about it, in a way that basically what myself and James Sweet, who was responsible for one of the fan films called Jason's Risen, he and I got together and started kicking around this idea. And for me, having done so many movies about characters and relationships and women, that I thought Pamela can be as iconic as, I don't know, Kathy Bates in Misery, Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, a very multi-dimensional character who had a very bad upbringing herself. And then, of course, gives birth to Jason. And we've done some interesting things about who is actually Jason's father with this. And then watching these two characters for the next 10 years, and this is post, World War II. So the world was a very kind of a different place. And having a son that looks the way he looks is not easy to be a single mother trying, with no skills, trying to keep work, trying to protect her son. And you basically watch this progression of what happens to her. And of course, we're watching the making of one of the greatest iconic monsters of all time. What is going into him those first, 10 years, till then, obviously, he reaches, Camp Crystal Lake, and within a year later, he drowns. So anything that was put into him, prior to that, to me, as somebody who's studied a lot of this about psychologies and your DNA plus your socialization, what that can do. And I've done so many true serial killers, and DC Sniper, and the man that killed Martha Moxley, that was one of the cousins to the Kennedy family, and I mean on and on. And you start to get into the minds of these sociopaths. It's incredibly scary because they don't think they're doing anything wrong, and that's the whole thing that I kind of am going with Pamela. Is she believes what she's doing is the right thing, and what she's teaching her son is the right way to deal with the world. So it's got a whole nother aspect to it, so that I wanted, in truth, to make something that if you never saw Friday the 13th and you just saw this, it would still work. If you hadn't seen one and you love this, it's like, I got to see where this goes. And now you watch the first Friday the 13th and away you go. But if you're a fan, you will see all these little, I guess I can't call them Easter eggs, but they're things that later, if you know the series, you go, oh, that's where that came from. Oh, that's that moment. And I just thought, as a fan myself, and having gone to so many of these conventions with people, these are the things that they just really, really are excited about. And I don't want to really do, any kind of bringing in people that were in the movies before, any kind of unique cameos. It's got to be kind of a standalone, scary movie, as, a Silence of the Lambs would be, or anything where you're meeting, this basically monstrous thinking woman. Mm-hmm. But to the outside world, she seems fine until things start to get a little more crazy, but still she can maintain a very normal attitude one moment, and then when that button's pushed, you know, she's as violent as what we saw in the first Friday the 13th, you know, the way
Yeah.
she did those kills. So I needed to feel like we could set all that up too, to understand what that rage is and where it came from, because that is, those passion kills like that rage thing is some of the scariest stuff that goes on in our real world. You know, it's they're in a different mindset than you know, a normal thinking person, and morals and all the rest of that, you know, are gone. That because how else can you do those kinds of things unless you truly believe you're doing something right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think as you kind of said it, there'd be so much in that kind of movie that could lay the foundations for the movies that have already occurred. And it's kind of mind-blowing really that we've had, is it 12 or 13 Friday the 13th movies, and yet there's still so much like untold story about
Yeah.
Jason. There's so much you could do with it, and I would I'd love to see you direct and write for that movie, because I think that could be incredible.
Yeah, as I said, you know, I hate to call anything a prequel or the backstory or whatever, but it does fall into that category if you have to label it. But as I said, I really would love this to be kind of a standalone movie that if you're a Friday person, this is great because now you get to see all of that, but it's not
Mhm.
literally the next beat at the end of the movie goes right into that. There's still time in there for them to sort of be part of that life at Crystal Lake until, you know, he drowns a year later. But it's you know, there is a lot of material, and if this thing ends up being like a, you know, 6 episode, 8 episode Netflix kind of thing, you know, that's fine too. It's you know, I'd love to have it in the theater. I'm a theater person. I go to the
Yes.
movies, you know, all the time. Tonight, finally going to get to go see the Batman, you know, which I've been dying to see. But I'm still that geek that, you know, I want to be in the theater the first day, first show with the, you know, the people that are
Mhm.
there like me. I want to see it right away. I want to see it with the crowd that hasn't talked to anybody else that had seen it. And of course, it's always, you know, horror, suspense, you know, anything that is a genre piece. Those are the things, or comedies, you know, went and saw, you know, what is that called? The guys that do all the stupid, ridiculous stunts. I just went right
Oh,
out.
Jackass.
Jackass. Thank you. I kept
Yeah.
wanting to think of a title that was them, but you know, it's what they are, Jackass. But yeah, it was the same thing. It's like people can't help but laugh, and I want to hear that. You know, we've been so close, you know, clustered away with the pandemic, and you know, you miss, you know, that thing of that group experience. And I don't care if we all have to wear the frickin' masks as long as we're together, you know, and experiencing that way. So I hope these movies, whether I get, you know, the Jason Never Dies one that, you know, has Jason in it and all takes place in the snow and in winter. So it's again, a very different approach to how you see it, but it's still right there, you know, in the Crystal Lake area. Um, or you know, the story with Pamela and young Jason, but it's just, you know, I want to see an audience's reaction. You know, I write things so that, you know, I feel like I'm sitting in the theater and how they're going to respond, which is,
Of
any of
course.
you guys who've seen Jason Live know that there's a lot of things I set up for the audience to actually say something back, like the American Express card. There was always somebody who'd say, "Don't leave home without it." You know, that's kind of lost on this generation, but for anybody that remembers those ads, you know, that was a big thing and always got a big laugh. And this guy, whoever said it, felt so cool, you know, that everybody laughed at what he contributed. But there's, you know, there's a bunch of those things that are kind of, you know, salt and peppered through there because, you know, to me, it is about, you know, people to people, you know, hopefully you
Absolutely.
like the people on the screen, and then you laugh at certain things. If you love James Bond, you know, the opening with the James Bond thing, that again was me saying, here's another franchise that's like the Bond thing. You know, there's one after another that keep getting made. And, you know, people over the years, that's been like one of their favorite things is that, you know, Jason, you know, in that kind of iconic Bond, you know, eye thing. So, you know, you try things. I didn't know if it was going to work, but I said, here we are 36 years later. And people are still going, man, I love that. It was just so great, and it's wonderful. I love the fans. I love that, we made something that really was a big part of their childhood or teenage years or whatever.
Exactly. And I think, as a fan of the series and the franchise, and as well as obviously, you get contacted by people who are also big fans of the franchise, and even people who just kind of casually watch Friday the 13th. The amount of people that have said, if they're sort of dipping their toes in the franchise, what should be the first movie they see? And a lot of them say the sixth part, because I think like you said, it's the reintroduction of Jason, but almost in like a Frankenstein kind of way, with the lightning bolt and how he rises again. So for you, how does it feel just to hear the kind of reaction that out of all these franchises, even to this date, Friday the 13th Part 6 is still widely regarded as the best?
All I can say is I'm completely humbled by it, because as I said earlier, I didn't expect that. I honestly thought I'm going to take a lot of chances, but as a horror fan, I wanted to deliver what I thought would still be fun in the theater. As you just said, for a lot of people, it's sort of the what I call the marijuana of the Friday movies. It's like the entry drug. It's like, yeah, smoke this. Okay, now take this, and now work your way up to the heroin, which some people, that was part 5, talking to Quentin Tarantino, part 5 is his favorite, and it's like, really? If so many people hated that because it wasn't Jason, and when you go, no, it was like as a really a grindhouse kind of movie, man. It was like everything that, those kind of movies are supposed to be, despicable and porno, and and I go, okay. But that's kind of like, each person, either it's like when they saw it in their life, maybe that was the first one you saw, so that was, the one that you kind of keep going back to, that really had the greatest impact. Or if people are just being introduced, a lot of people go, start with this one. It's got kids, it's got humor, there's no sex, there is, and that moment for everybody to understand, it was in the script that Darcy was supposed to have her top off, but on the day we were shooting, she said, do you really need to have me with my top off? And I go, are you uncomfortable? And she goes, yeah, kind of. And I go, don't. This is a comedy sequence. Don't worry about that. We got look at Court's tits as you're down there on him. And then recently we just put a picture out of me on top of Darcy in a camper with Jason looking through the window, and I'm topless going like this. And, I have signed more autographs on that picture, this past weekend than any of the other ones. People love that I was obviously making fun of everybody being upset that I didn't put in nudity, in the movie. But for a lot of people, it's sort of like, yeah, I show my kid, this is the first one. I go, oh, how old's your kid? 7? Really? Okay. But Jason, Freddy, all these, they are like Frankenstein was. I mean, I saw those when I was really, really young. My parents objected to it, thought I shouldn't be looking at that stuff. And these guys now, despite the blood and the gore and all the other stuff that's in them, they're really not that, traumatizing to a child. They sort of just accept it and they think it's cool. Parents come with their kids dressed up like Jason to these things, and the kids are so happy because you hide, when you're behind a mask, and you get to, have everybody look at you and go, wow, you look great and stuff, and you just sit there, behind this thing. So there's a lot of appeal. It was hard for us to do Frankenstein or the Mummy. Dracula, we could slick our hair back and put on a towel and pretend we have a cape, and that was sort of it. But with Jason, it's so easy at Halloween to get one of those plastic Halloween masks. Freddy's a little more challenging than that, obviously. And Michael Myers, certainly, again, first, and to me still the best of all that. I think Carpenter just was so great on that very first one. And I had the advantage of seeing it first day, first show with an audience. I mean, I can't tell you how much they were like up out of their seats. I mean, popcorn was flying in the air with the jump scares and things. And everybody left going, he's out there. He left. Donald Pleasance didn't kill him. He's still there, and that was new. We had not seen that. You always killed the monster at the end of the thing, but this one didn't. So it really resonated with everyone who loves those kinds of movies. And of course, you as a filmmaker, you couldn't go around in the 70s without somebody going, can you get me something like in a forest or some abandoned area and some guy in some sort of mask, I don't care, bag, sack, whatever, and a bunch of girls that he can kill. And then I can get you a picture. And we all didn't really want to do that. And as I said, I did Friday because they're letting me do one, but letting me kind of roll with it. So all these years later, to get back to your question, yeah, it's still amazing to me. It still blows me away. Even with the COVID mask on, people will come up to me in a liquor store, in a pet store one day. It's like, you're Tom Mcloughlin. You did, Jason Lights. I go, how did you know that? And he goes, oh yeah, I've seen your interviews. And I went, wow, even behind a, Robert's mask, they still, and of course this sort of helps, I guess, with the hair. But yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's a real blessing. And being over in Manchester, a few months back, that was just amazing too. I mean, just finally get to be among the British fans and hear what they loved and stuff. And you realize, everybody sort of united in these movies, their love of these movies. We're all a bunch of sort of misfits that somehow all fit. We get together like that, and we all love these things. And people raise their arm and they say, here's that scene from your movie, and they got it tattooed, Jason on the motorhome or something. And I'm going, holy shit. I mean, that's amazing. That's a commitment, rest of your life commitment. Your billboard for my film.
Absolutely. So in regards to the director role from the movie, how did that all kind of start for you?
How I got the gig, basically?
Yeah.
Well, I had done One Dark Night, which was, real low budget, $800,000 movie that was, paid for by Mormons who needed a tax shelter. And, we made the movie very fast. We had 3 weeks to prep it, but I had been trying to sell it for, at least 3-4 years in the 70s. But it was like, yeah, it's good. I like it, kind of, like old school. Yeah. But you got anything with a knife and a guy and a mask, and, which got me and many of my peers to sort of hate the slasher movies because that's all they would let you make. And unless you came up with something different, like Chucky was, or some of these other ones that managed to get through, or Fright Night, what Tom Holland did, which I thought was really wonderful. It was very hard to get a movie made, but finally I got One Dark Night made, and it was, it found its own little audience. It had, a small following. And then of course, once it kind of hit on beta and VHS and things, then it really became kind of a cult movie. And there's, and the copyright was never picked up. So if you look it up on IMDb, you'll see about 13 different titles for this movie, because every country got a hold of it, changed the title, and released it and made money. None of us, me as writer, director, the actor, nobody's made any money on that since the day, we made it and got paid. But that's sort of what happens in that wonderful world of, small budgeted things. People just, let the copyrights go, and then somebody jumps in and grabs it. So that was the movie that it was sent to Paramount for a film called April Fool's Day. And I read the script and I thought it was wonderful. It had like, a wonderful kind of comic take on, somebody among us is killing us and all that. And they ended up going with another director, but Frank Mancuso Jr., who was producing both of these movies, said, would Tom like to do a Friday the 13th? And my initial reaction was, no, I don't. Because, from what I've heard, it's just gone downhill and stuff. And so I met with him, and that's when basically he said, look, I love the Gothic style you had in One Dark Night. I think bringing something like that to it, if that's what you love to do. You know, we love to have the filmmaker do the thing that he wants to. And I said, well, I also want to have comedy. And he goes, well, you're not going to make fun of Jason. I go, no, 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 no. It's still going to be a full-on, to me, monster movie. He's not like a serial killer slasher. You know, in fact, he's not going to slash any time in it. It's all going to be either jabs, twisting heads off, decapitating 3 people, you know, things that are kind of unimitatable. You know, if you, as a human being, you couldn't really do most of those kills. And I just wanted it to have agenda, you know. And he said, well, what do you mean? It's like, somehow Jason has to have something that he's trying to do through the movie. It's not just randomly going around killing people for no good reason. And of course, what I found, kind of figured out as I was doing it, was Tommy causing him to come back from the dead. All the great monsters have always said, you know, love dead, hate living, whether it was Frankenstein or, you know, Dracula saying to be dead must be glorious, really dead. So I thought, same thing, Jason, he probably was happy as hell being down there, nice and peaceful. Suddenly in comes this kid, you know, and then the lightning, and now he's back, and his agenda is get that kid, and anybody that gets in his way or, you know, comes anywhere close to him when he's on that mission is going down. And by the end, of course, he does accomplish what he wanted to get him down in Crystal Lake. And I used the old ghost theory that, you know, you have to go back to where you know, died, you know, to kind of, you know, conclude the curse. And then, of course, for Tommy, he's screwed up. So he's got to get people to believe that Jason is back. And the sheriff only thinks that this crazy kid who just came out of an institution is killing people, trying to prove, you know, that Jason's back. And so there was, you know, it had much more of a story form to it. And that, you know, also the fact that they were cool with all that made me all the more kind of excited to go in and do it.
Yeah, and I think watching the movie, I think, especially when you explain it, you can definitely kind of see what you're trying to get across in the film. And I kind of also think that maybe that's why it kind of resonates with people a bit more, because there clearly was some kind of objective for Jason. Whereas I think, as you said in the previous ones, he just seemed to sort of wander around and just almost just kill anyone he sees, really. So there was kind of like a beginning, middle, and well, what we thought would be the end, but obviously it carries on to part 7. So whilst you were directing and writing for the movie, did you have quite a lot of freedom, or were you a bit restricted in certain areas?
Not at all. I mean, the only thing that Frank told me is, he said, you know, the Motion Picture Rating Board hates these things, and they will come at the kills with a passion. So if I was you, I would, you know, think about whatever your kills are, being able to shoot them in a way that, you know, if you had to make cuts, you know, you could still maintain the impact of, you know, what it was. So yeah, I basically shot things so that I could really like edit it, you know, like in 3 different versions to basically keep the whole kill in, but, you know, you just take out certain things if they objected to it. So obviously the first screening, we showed them with everything so that they could go, oh, no, X, you know, it's like, okay, what bothers you? Well, this and this and this and this and this and this. So, you know, you go in and you take, because we were cutting on film, you know, you take a few frames here and a few frames there, and, you know, and you give them sort of the 1.5 version. It's like, no. And this went on 9 times. We had 9 screenings for the Motion Picture Rating Board until we finally got an R. And you know what the kill was that they objected to the most, wouldn't leave it alone, and it was like the last thing that I had to kind of make the compromise for? The back bend of the sheriff. Not a drop of blood, you know, no gore, no nothing like that. It literally was an old comedy sketch thing that I did with Dick Van Dyke and Tommy Smothers back in the 70s, and it was called The Chiropractor, and it was kind of bending Dick Van Dyke in half like that. And that's nothing more than like Warner Brother cartoon kind of visual gag, sight gag kind of thing. And I thought, what if we put that in the context of Jason doing that to somebody, and you hear the sound, it would be like, oh, and that got to them. It really got to them. And in the theaters, it's also one of those ones that has the most amount of, oh yeah, shit, and you don't see anything. It's all in your imagination. So it was really funny that had to keep getting trim, but it didn't really hurt the effect. It still works. So other than that, that was the only thing that kind of had to watch out for. And then I had Jason's father at the end of the movie. We introduced him at the grave site, paying the old caretaker to take care of his mother's grave and Jason's grave. And then his father was sort of like, I sort of envisioned him like an almost kind of Svengali, just evil eyes and stuff, that this would be, to me, the person that kind of would be the element that's in him that's just, pure evil. And Frank said before we even, went to camera, as much as I like the idea, we can't let the fans think that the next movie is going to be about Jason's dad. And I said, do you think they really would? He goes, I can't take the risk. We ended on Tommy Jarvis on part 5. People thought, okay, that's it. They're going to make Tommy Jarvis into the Jason character. We ain't coming back. So it hurt our box office because there was a lot of people that, didn't come back. And it also didn't help that we were the second weekend after the Aliens opened. So if you saw Aliens, it's like, all your buddies, come on, you want to see a great one? Oh, the Friday, Thursday. Oh, fuck that. Come on, see, Aliens. And then the second week, when we might have gotten people that saw it the first week, The Fly opens, Cronenberg's. So it's like we were bookend, these things are bookend with us, and it certainly affected the box office. But the happy end to all that is, over the years, it just kept building, in its popularity on the home market. And even when they have special screenings of it now, and I go and to introduce those things or do Q&A afterwards, the reaction's still the same, which is just so great to see something done so long ago and hear people who either hadn't seen it before or had just really get into it still. So it's managed to somehow age well, which you don't know. I mean, you can't predict it. And as I told you, I thought it would last a week and then be gone, forgotten, and get on with my life. But it as Jason lives, Jason lives, the movie lives. So, I cannot complain. I'm happy so many people get so much joy out of it.
Yeah, something that I really wanted to ask you. So as sort of the time when the movie sort of premiered, do you remember sort of how you felt as it was going to be premiering, or the kind of general reaction of people after the movie when it came out?
Yeah, well, for one, we had a preview screening at the studio, and they invited an audience that they figured these are the people that would love to see this. And I believe it was like I want to say like 5 o'clock in the afternoon screening. And people were lined up in front of Paramount like at 9 in the morning. And they started drinking, smoking weed, taking whatever. So, and it was like a hot day, I remember. So they were just toasting in the sun and toasted in their head. And they came in, and it was just wild. The energy was just incredibly insane. And from the time the first image came on the screen, they were like, "Arr!" And that continued through the entire movie. I couldn't hear one word of dialogue. They just literally were going off of, whatever they could hear and what they saw, and were going crazy, at everything. And, I said to Frank after the screening, well, I guess it worked. He goes, are you kidding? No, they're incredible. And I go, yeah, but they probably would have liked, a cartoon, they were so, no, that's it. Yeah, no, I've done enough of these to know. And he goes, but we need 3 more kills. I said, why? I got 13 kills. I really love the idea. I had 13 kills. He goes, nope. I just feel there's an area where we just got to put a couple more in, so come up with something. I was like, oh shit, okay. So, I knew I hadn't killed the caretaker because I was going to use him for the Jason's father scene. So I thought, okay, that's kind of a given. And well, I can take the sissy scene where she gets pulled out the window and you just hear noise and actually see Jason take her head and twist it. And of course, in our version, he literally pulled the head up. You see the neck stretch and snap, that was taken out. But, you see her head obviously roll out of the car. And then I thought, well, if we're going to have we had to shoot in LA, if we're going to have the caretaker, let me see him walking home at night. And somehow Jason, finds him and, he kind of confronts him and then, breaks the bottle, and gets him in the neck. And again, that effect looked incredible. What was there originally, where you actually saw the blood coming out the edge of the bottle.
Oh, cool.
But that had to be trimmed. And I thought, well, if we're going to be outside, who would be outside at night? How about some guy proposing to his girlfriend, and because I'm going to make a romantic night out of it. And he puts the blanket out there and kind of that's what he's doing. That sort of looks like they're going to go into sex. And then he hears something. And of course, Jason finds them. And the kill, I wasn't happy about at all. This, double spearing somebody. And I thought, well, all right. Not one of the more inventive ones, but I was sort of under the gun and had to come up with something that wasn't going to cost a lot of money, to do. And kind of, I could do, 1, 2, 3 and fulfill, what Frank wanted. So that, those are the, the only kind of couple things that, that had to change. But then that screening, we went right into the theaters when it opened on August the 1st. And every theater that I went to was packed. Every audience was just out of their minds excited. But probably the best moment in all of that was a midnight screening in Westwood. And all the executives from Paramount Studios, were there. Now, none of those guys ever wanted to acknowledge that Friday the 13th was making far more money for them over the years than all their big movies. But to see all these guys lined up, and when it was over and I kind of turned towards them and they all went, and I went, okay, I've got those guys. And of course, I was immediately asked to do the next one. And I said, I just don't have any ideas. I put everything I know in there. I have to really think about that. And then Frank said, well, what about Freddy meets Jason? Like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman? Is that what we're talking? He goes, yeah, sort of. And I went, God, they exist in two different realms, really. I mean, the way where Jason's at and where Freddy's at. And he goes, well, I'm sure you'll figure out something. I'm talking to New Line now to see if we can get the two studios to merge on it. And, just like, Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller, there was no merging of, no, they wanted to keep it, and Paramount wasn't going to, let them have Jason. So, that wasn't going to happen. So I jokingly said, well, you guys have Cheech and Chong. Why don't we do Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein? Jason meet Cheech and Chong meet Jason. And he laughed. He said, I don't think it's the same audience. I go, are you kidding? I mean, look at that crowd that was at all these screenings. They would go and see a Cheech and Chong movie. They'd go see a Jackass movie, and they'd go see a Friday the 13th. That's that same, party kind of thing. He goes, well, I don't know if that's the kind of audience that we could, I don't know, that'd take a lot of work on our part. And I go, well, I would think about it, because I think it'd be very both funny, and I could still make it scary, in the parts where they're not in it, when he's doing things. But, that didn't come to fruition. And when I started talking about it, years later, I think maybe 5 years ago or so, I started talking about it. It kind of went like horror viral. Everybody was like, we could have had a Cheech and Chong Jason movie. Oh man, which I thought was so ironic that, maybe even today they could do that. Obviously not with the lawsuit, suit going on, but it's still, to me, because I don't know how many people would make that connection. Abbott and Costello, meet Frankenstein, or Abbott and Costello met the Mummy, and Abbott and Costello met Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and the Invisible Man and all that. That became its own very successful franchise. And eventually, it was, Jason meets Freddy. There's a really good fan film about Jason and Michael Myers having a fight that they did it really well. I don't know what the story would have been to go around something like that, but we've always done that, where, Godzilla meets King Kong, or, you know,
Exactly.
it's always trying to put those two things together, which I thought it's not really the best stories, but for the audience, it's like, yeah, I want to see, you know, all the Avengers this time, you know, I don't, you know, and
Yeah.
let's have cameos in Spider-Man, and it's, you know, Batman's another one that's like, when I looked the other night, how many Batman movies have been made since, like, what, 89, I think, was the one that Tim Burton did, and that sort of started it.
Mhm.
And you go, aren't people tired of that? It's like, no, you know,
No,
they'll line
never.
up to see it. And as long as they do that, we'll keep making them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think those character crossover movies, they will be the movies that really will drive people to go to the cinemas, because they're going to be like, what could they possibly do with this movie? And like I said, I think with the Freddy versus Jason that came out, ever since that came out, I've not heard non-stop talks about there being sort of like more of them, and people wanting more kind of crossover over movies. So hopefully
Yeah.
in the future we could definitely get a few more of them.
Yeah. I love when people can embrace something really new, you know, a new kind of a monster, or a new kind of a way of doing a horror movie and stuff. But the problem is that to get those things green lit, because the people who are putting up the money, it's like, well, how do we know people are going to go to this? Whereas if you're borrowing something that has been established, it's like, well, we know everybody that was born from 1950 to 1970, this was their world, this was their TV show or whatever, and a new generation will have heard of that, and you know, it sounds like it's going to be funny or fun or scary or whatever, so they always are trying to hedge their bets that people, you know, it's already kind of pre-sold, and then they'll spend as much as they could possibly spend. But there's all these great ideas and original things that unfortunately don't get made. But now with cable and streaming and all that, I don't know if you guys get Shutter over there, that
Yeah, yeah,
channel. You know, I mean, for those of us who are horror geeks, it's great. You know, my
yeah.
girlfriend is a complete 80s chick. I mean, that's it. You know, Shutter's on almost 24/7 over here. And, you know, 80s music videos and all of that stuff. I mean, she lives, you know, and breathes by that. And it's so funny to me because, you know, I look at it again and it's like, yeah, it was really fun and entertaining. In a way, a lot of things after that, you know, didn't quite have the same, you know, fun as that period had. But
Mhm.
we were just, you know, we were making a living and, you know, kind of going along with whatever they told us we could make, you know, because this is where the, you know, they felt, okay, we know we can have an audience with a Jason movie, or we know we have an audience with the Halloween movie. So get in there and make a good one, you know.
Yeah, and I always kind of, as you echoing kind of what you said, that you always hear that the 80s, and it's pretty much for me, it's definitely a staple that the 80s and even 70s, I think, are some of the best horror
Mm,
movies ever made, most
yeah.
rewatchable horror movies. Um, I kind of sometimes wonder that, do you think maybe it could be because of like audience expectations? Do you think maybe that nowadays they're striving for such a high standard that sometimes not a lot of movies are going to kind of hit that? Whereas I feel like maybe in the 80s and 70s, it was kind of like you just took it for what it was and people loved it.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you thought that was kind of a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, there was a period in the 70s where here in Los Angeles, there were a number of theaters where you didn't go to see one movie, you didn't go to see two movies, you went and saw three low budget horror movies. Maybe one was, you know, Mario Bravo thing, or maybe something, you know, was a Hammer horror movie from England, and then maybe a Roger Corman movie or something. But you know, we would go and we'd sit through three movies, and you know, it wasn't a big deal. They normally were all like 90 minutes, some even shorter, you know, and then some trailers and stuff. But you know, we got fed so much stuff, you know, that we could see. But again, there, you had to see it there, or you weren't going to see it, and it was, you know, it was gone. And now, of course, we have a much more select audience in terms of, you know, you know, you could go on a date to one of these things, but now it's got to somehow be the other person really wants to see that too. or they're going to be, upset through the whole screening. And every so often something like It comes along, which of course there's a generation that saw it as a TV movie. And of course, Tim Curry was the definitive, clown from hell. And, Pennywise coming back in the new look and all the rest of that, he's become to me a classic monster, which he wasn't really just as a miniseries monster. So now that's become, its own franchise, and, with a very large following. And seeing it in the theaters was great, but, first day, first show, like, why are they not reacting? I don't get it. The only thing they reacted to is when the boy and the girl kissed, the kids kissed. Then it got like, oh, and I went, really? So then I went to like, the really down and out, lower class section of town to see it with those people, which I call the Yahoo people, because there's always certain things that happen like Yahoo, and sound, not a sound. And I'm going, has television and, video and cable and internet, has that just made people so passive when they watch things? It's like, oh yeah, it's cool, that they don't react anymore. Because I thought there was some, great stuff in there. And a lot of these movies of recent, I was always hoping for the bigger response. And the last thing I really remember where people were responding was back in the day when Blair Witch, came out.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like, wow, no blood, black and white, completely different approach to, to a horror movie. And then the Bruce Willis thing just went out of my head as well. Sixth Sense, that was another one that the ending just had everybody just so shocked and surprised, and had a big return audience to it. And there's been certain things that have done well, certain, bringing back the, Halloween again, stuff like that. But this last Halloween, I'm sorry, I was angry more than anything else watching it, because I thought, where's the director? These performances are dreadful. And I like Jamie Lee Curtis. I thought she's great. There's a lot of people that didn't feel that way at all, thought it all worked, it was great, but evil dies tonight, and all these extras all going, ah! I thought that's not what Halloween is. And it just felt so false. There's, I don't know how many actors I went, they're much better than this. Why isn't the performance is being honed in and not so over the top dramatic? I don't know what, Halloween Ends is going to be like, if that's going to fall in that same category or not. I will go and see it. I will lay my money down like always. But things like that sort of disappoint me, because it's not taking it, to another level, or getting it to be, smarter and still scary somehow. I thought the opening and him coming out of the fire and what he did with the firemen, so, that's the kind of thing we wanted to see. And the recreation of the Dr. Loomis character, Donald Pleasance, I went, wow, technology, look what it can do. But after that point, it just lost me, I'm sorry. So, there's times where you just really want it to succeed. And then when it somehow doesn't, but you can't argue about, it did well. So they're, as far as they're concerned, it was a good investment.
Yeah, I mean, they could have honestly put out whatever they wanted to. I mean, if it's got the franchise tag against it, it's gonna do well. Yeah, like you said, I'm a huge theater attender. Like, I love going to the movies and seeing these releases. And I think because obviously there's a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre that's been released. That's a Netflix exclusive.
Yeah.
To me, I got really worried when I saw that's an exclusive, because I was like, is this the start now where these major horror movies are now going to not be shown at theaters anymore? They're all going to be watch at home online. And I just don't think you can beat the cinema atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, I saw Nightmare Alley, and I know Mr. Del Toro. He's part of our Masters of Horror dinner group that we all get together, all the guys that have done horror movies from the 1950s all the way up to the most recent ones, and everybody's so cool. Everybody is such a kid. It's so nice to actually have females now as part of it, because when it started, obviously it was, only dudes, and maybe, one or two, women that had made horror movies. But, to see Nightmare Alley at like a Directors Guild screening with a packed audience, and to be sitting kind of, I think it was like 5 rows from the front, and to look up at it, and Del Toro really shot everything like from, as he said, a kid's perspective. So it felt very cinematic, and the lighting and all that was very, I mean, he did exactly what I did with my Friday the 13th. I shot that movie as if I was doing it in black and white, and then made sure it was very contrasty. So if you ever watch Jason Lives and you turn the color off, you'll see it looks very much like a kind of a universal horror movie. And Del Toro did that same thing with Nightmare Alley. He wanted to make it in black and white, but they told him, we'll take $3 million away from you if you do. He goes, okay, we'll make it in color, but they also shot it, in black and white, and so that, in color in a way that they can convert it to black and white very easily. And I saw that print with him, I don't know, about a month ago, which also was like a completely different experience, but very, very cool. But it was heartbreaking when that movie opened, and when West Side Story opened, and Macbeth, and so many movies that were really good movies that you wanted to see in the cinema. Well, Spider-Man came in, and basically all the multiplexes and stuff took those other movies out. And people literally would buy a ticket to go see Nightmare Alley, and when they go into the theater, they go, well, we're actually not going to be screening that. We're going to be screening Spider-Man. So you got 2 choices. We can give you your money back, or you can use that ticket to go see Spider-Man. It's like, well, is there going to be a screening of it? Well, we don't know, but not tonight. You can get a return and maybe come back on another night. And I thought, they're taking the money away from the movie, and saying, no, you have to go see this because, we've got so many people, we need the use of the theater, and there wasn't enough people coming. And that's when I began to really realize, yeah, we are in a whole new age since COVID and all of this, that, that experience, not enough people, were coming out to see it. And, these things were considered, failures, but failures at the box office, not necessarily with the critics or whatever. But, they'll be obviously rediscovered as classics as the years go by. And I, who have loved Steven Spielberg for so many years, and then kind of didn't like this whole period that he's kind of been in, where he's doing more dramatic things, and it just wasn't engaging. I was watching this in a theater with a full audience, and we had a great time. And I thought, oh, thank God he's made a big, successful type movie. Nobody came. Nobody came. Most everybody saw it on TV or saw it on a laptop, and it's not the same experience. All those moves and choreography and stuff. I think he'll still win like Best Director award from the Directors Guild, which also means that'll be the Oscar for him as well. Probably just because it was so well crafted, and he's Steven Spielberg, and he deserves, another Oscar in this incredible career. But hard to say, really hard to say in this day and age. But yeah, that whole thing of that experience in the theater is, at the moment, it's like, you better be a franchise. You better be something that's cost $2 million to make, and then we'll put it out there. And how long has Batman been out now? Like, I guess it's the 2nd week coming up here in the States.
Yeah, it's not been out too long. It's only been out, I think, just maybe about a week.
Yeah, but I went to buy tickets this morning for tonight, and basically it was all sold out except on the sides. And I'm seeing an IMAX, and it's like, I don't want to see IMAX from the side, so I had to find a later screening so I could at least be in the middle, to see it. Yeah. And it's a 3-hour movie. So it's like, okay, I'm going to roll out of there about 2 in the But I'll be fine. But I just thought, again, it's doing really well. I mean, this is a Thursday night here in the States, and, you don't be selling out on the Thursday night, 2nd week, but it obviously is really working.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a fantastic movie. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. I I think I heard somewhere that there was a connection between you and a movie called Scary Movie.
Mhm.
Um, it was. Could you talk to us about that kind of connection? Because I was really interested to hear about that.
Yeah, that was one of my boy, you dumb moments in my life. I've had a couple of those. Uh, but what happened is, after I made Friday, um, and then, I went on to do Date with an Angel, which was the romantic comedy, sort of Frank Capra, who was my mentor and kind of helped me through the script and everything. At the front. That was the next thing I wanted to do. And then Dino De Laurentiis, who was my producer on that, said, "You dumb, you got to do a horror movie. I got the Stephen King. Sometimes they come back." So, I went right into that. But I was sent at a period where I had nothing going on, a bunch of scripts, and one of them was called Scary Movie. And I started reading it, and it was like, wow, this is funny. But I'm right from the get-go, all the references to other horror movies and all that, I went, if I said yes to this, it's almost like I'm just doing what I already did. And as much as I liked the script and stuff, I thought, well, I kind of, made a monster movie and a comedy and, underwater fight and car chases. And, I just thought, well, for something that costs under $3 million, I tried to do a lot with it and stuff. And I just felt it had a lot of similar things, in terms of just the tone of it. So I passed. And then I kept reading other scripts. And then I went, that one still was the one that I enjoyed the most. So I called my agent back and I said, what's going on with Scary Movie? It's like, Wes Craven grabbed it. I go, well, okay, Wes will do a great job with it. Of course, off it goes, as comes out of Scream and Scream 2 and 3. And, we just had another one. So it would have been, a huge, as they say, cash cow as a director to have been part of the original and take it on through. But the most ironic thing was years and years later, I went in on I can't even remember the name of the show, but something that Kevin Williamson, had created, because he was doing like his scripts and also producing these shows. And, I went in and we're talking and stuff about the thing. And then he finally said, I got to tell you something. Your Friday the 13th had a huge impact when I was writing Scary Movie. And I said, "You're kidding." He said, "No, I thought what you're doing is really cool. I obviously took it a different direction." I said, "Yes, you did." And I turned it down. He goes, "You did?" And I went, "Yeah, because I guess I saw or felt those references, and I didn't want to feel like I was kind of copying myself, on the next thing." And he goes, "That's very ironic." And I go, "Yeah, but I wish now I had done it. Not that Wes didn't do an incredible job, but it's one of those things that who knew, it was going to become what it became." Sometimes they come back. Dino gave me an offer of either we can pay you double now, or we can pay you, the director's fee and then tie you to any, sequels. And I figured, no way is there's going to be any sequel. It's a one story type thing. And of course, it had 2 sequels, that I could have been part of. But, it's those things, you decide, at the time, I don't think so. And then you go, no. And, much to your surprise. And there's been a ton of things that didn't work out. I was on the prequel to The Exorcist for 2 years and signed and over at Warner Brothers and prepping the movie and, having the location scouts. I didn't go on them, but they went and did scouts and sent back the pictures in Africa. We casted for a small Black boy to play the kid that gets possessed and things. And we were trying to find the best script. And the one that William Wisher had written that, I came in on, it just was too much like the original, or trying to be like the original. And we thought, we've already seen, all these almost jokes about spitting up pea soup and profanity and all that. It needs to be something different. And I finally got obsessed with this writer, Caleb Carr, who had written The Alienist. And so far, nobody could make that as a movie because it was like too expensive and things. But his writing, I thought, was terrific. So I said, he's the guy that's got to do it. They reached out to him. He said, well, I've got a couple of things I have to do, then we'll do it. So we waited. And then finally, Caleb, came aboard. He and I hit it off, talked about it and stuff. I said, I don't want to do any, post effects. I want everything to be in camera like the original was and all that. Oh, yeah, that's cool. That's great and stuff. So when he turns in the script, it was, for me, so much talking, conversations with Father Marin and the boy and all this. And I went, this is like my dinner with Satan. This is not a movie, it's like a play. And so at this point, after 2 years, the Jim Robinson, who runs Morgan Creek, goes, so you're telling us you don't want to direct this script? And I said, not as is. Well, we all love it. Okay. He goes, if you're out, then, then we remove you. You basically sign a thing saying you had nothing to do with any of the ideas that, are in the script and stuff. Okay. And of course, if the movie makes over 50 million domestically, in the States, then, you'll get a percentage. And of course, you always go, yeah, right. But, who knew? So they started looking for another director. They brought in John Frankenheimer, who I had worked under. I was the mutated bear in his movie Prophecy, so, and I only took that role because I could be on a set for months and months and learn from one of the best directors, that were around, especially in the 50s and 60s. And so I knew him and I thought, okay, well, John will do a good job, on the thing. And John was on it for a year. And then he went in for some sort of simple procedure in the hospital and he died. And it was like, what? So now the script started going around again. And, my agent got it, said, you want to take another look at it? And go, yeah, I'm curious to see what, in the year, what John had done with it. And I get the script. It's the same script, word for word. I said, I can't believe John was okay with this. All right, well, no. I said no before, and I'm saying no again. So then it went to Paul Schrader. And I thought, okay, Paul Schrader, Taxi Driver, Calvinist religion. He's going to bring something to this visually, and all his movies are always really kind of really offbeat. So Paul shot the script, didn't change it, shot the script. He turned in his director cut. Morgan Creek, Warner Brothers looked at it and they went, you're fired. This is not scary. It's not so Paul leaves and they bring in Rennie Harlan. And Rennie Harlan was only supposed to add more visual things to it, keep this, what they had shot already, and had spent 40 million, to make. Somehow Rennie in the process got to reshoot the entire movie. And then a lot of the effects were, visual effects done in post. And, it didn't work. So now they've spent 40 and 40, so $80 million on the thing, which I was going to do for 18 million because I've done so much television. I was very savvy about how to save money and still be effective. And of course, it opened, people hated it, and then they, at some point, they decided to bring out the Paul Schrader version as like an art film, and showed that. And again, that didn't do much of anything. So I think they made something like, the reports like 48 million. So just shy of that 50. So of course, I never made a penny. And all I'm left with is telling these war stories to you guys. But that again is kind of the Hollywood thing. And I really didn't want to do an Exorcist prequel unless I really felt that it would be great. And I needed to talk to William Peter Blatty. No, he doesn't want to talk to anybody doing this. I begged him, I got to go up and, spend a day with William Peter Blatty. And I said, my hand to God, if I don't think this script is great, I'm not going to do it. He says, great, because, if I don't like it, I'll go on every talk show, I'll tear it down, I'll tear you down. So, and I went, I promise you, Bill, I will not, and I sort of felt like I needed to be true to that word. It was like both him and just my own instinct that this is not what people want to see. They don't want to see a talk. When you say The Exorcist, and obviously Blumhouse is now doing a whole bunch of them. I don't know what they're going to do, what they're going to come up with. I'm sure people will go and see it out of pure curiosity's sake, but are they going to match that first one? Of course not, you know. And
No.
you know, as I told Blatty, if I can at least get close to the third one that you did, Bill, you know, the intensity and what you did with that, I would feel like I did diligence, you know. But to top that first one, having seen it in the theater when it first opened, seeing people throwing up, passing out, and, you know, ambulances out front. I mean, it was a phenomenal, you know, experience. It wasn't even a movie. It was, I don't know what you call it, but when the movie was over, The Exorcist, people were just like frozen, you know, like putting their coat on and then stopping and then just staring at the screen. It's like we were all in shock. Never had seen anything, you know, quite that intense. So, you know, you know, when people say, what's your favorite horror movie? It's like, there's no question. I mean, that's it. I mean, the reaction that got, haven't ever seen anything, you know, like that. Halloween was a lot of fun, great thrill rides, but it didn't devastate people. It didn't send them back to church,
No.
you know, like The Exorcist did.
No,
So
The
it was
Exorcist.
great to have 10 minutes of that, you know, Exorcist moment.
Yeah, exactly. The Exorcist is one, is just true one of a kind. There just never will be a movie that hit sort of the way that movie did, and even still does to this day. I think people still talk about it, terrifies them to this day.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of, if we go more down to the sort of comic convention side of things.
Mhm.
So obviously you mentioned before how you've just come off a convention this past weekend.
Yeah, yeah, the PA Horror Convention, and that was in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania.
So for you, what's your experience with these conventions and sort of meeting the fans and hearing their stories to you?
Yeah, I was never really that interested in doing, you know, any of these things. Part of it was my own going, you know, if I made something and somebody likes it so much they want me to autograph it, I'm not going to charge people for that. That's stupid, you know. Let somebody get to me, I'll, you know, do that. And then finally, somebody, you know, talked me into going to one of these things. And when I saw people so lined up, and then, you know, Bill and Ted were over here, and you know, what's his face from Fright Night, the actor that played the vampire, Chris Sarandon, you know, was there, and all these other, you know, people, Linda Blair. You know, I went, this is really cool to be in this, and look at all the merchandising and all the horror stuff that I wouldn't have seen. And the truth is, you know, if I went to a convention years ago and Boris Karloff was there, I'd pay $100 in a second to have him sign things. And I'm thinking, I'm no Boris Karloff, I'm no James Whale, but to this particular generation, I am. And that's what is so shocking. And, you know, they come up, you know, and literally, you know, out of 100 people, 98%, you know, will say, first thing, you probably heard this before, but you made the best one. I just, and I mean, to hear that over and over and over, and of course, you know, my response is always the same. I really appreciate that, because I do, you know, to hear it, it's not so much ego as much as it is like, God, I did something and this person had a great time, and I didn't know that was going to happen like that. So the fans really are the ones that kind of make it magic. And that they, you know, and they'll come up sometimes with 5 or 6 items they've been carrying for years, just waiting for me to get, you know, to the East Coast, because they've got CJ Graham's signature that they got 2 years ago, and then they've got Tom Matthews, the male star, you know, what they got, and they're just trying to get their book, you know, Crystal Lake Memories, as many names as they can get in there, or the poster or whatever. And I thought, well, that is worth a lot of money, you know, if he was going to go and sell it. And they all say the same thing, you know, no way am I going to sell this. But as soon as they say, no, don't put it to me, just put your name in. And I realized they probably will at some point, but that's fine. I mean, if they can sell it and make money off of it, you know, I know for a fact I don't get any of the merchandising or any of the stuff and any of the ideas that I created that are now merchandised, you know, and Tommy floating underwater with Jason holding, and, you know, think images and stuff you create, and, you know, it's a toy. But, you know, the thing I started to realize is it's like, no, they love the fact that, you know, they pay a little money and they get an autograph, they get a selfie, They get to talk, you know, they get to ask questions. If they're a young filmmaker, I will give them as much good advice as I can give them from, you know, making a number of films. And all of that is, to me, just really a wonderful kind of kickback, you know, out of all the, as all the years have gone on, that they still feel, you know, so passionate about the movie. And it's so, you know, multi-generational. You know, little 8-year-olds come up with a mask, you know, to sign. And then of course, you know, guys in their 80s, you know, I saw this thing when I was 30 and man, you know, never forgot it. And, you know, you give us an autograph, and it's just wonderful. So yeah, it's a great blessing, really, to, you know, be able to have these conventions. And it used to be, it was only Star Trek, you know, had it, and then Star Wars, you know. Now you go to these things, and, you know, I hooked up with the bass player of Megadeth, you know,
Wow.
there, and we start talking, and, you know, he goes, yeah, I got a book, you know, and he, you know, signed his book to me. And then we start talking about rock and roll, and, you know, because I want to create another band, because my band, the Sloths, have really slowed down since COVID. And he said, I'd be up for that. Yeah, here's my number. So I thought, I'm forming a band with the bass player of Megadeth, you know, and I already sort of have Vinnie Vincent from Kiss, you know, has expressed a very similar interest. And I thought, if I can pull all these guys together, and then, you know, my goal is, you know, if the band is called Horror Rocks, and basically it's, you know, horror and rock and roll together, and using people who have been in horror movies, you know, either as actors, directors, or whatever, who are also musicians, or just great, you know, heavy metal or whatever, you know, music style musicians, and put them together. But the songs that we play are only songs from horror movies, but classic songs, everything from Sympathy for the Devil, you know, that was in Interview with a Vampire, to Killer Clowns from Outer Space, you know, to Pet Sematary. I mean, there's literally like over 50 songs that are all songs that most anybody who loves music of that period or those periods know and love. And if you're a horror fan, it's like you remember it from hearing it in the movie. So that, to me, is the whole thing. Is like almost like Hollywood Vampires, where you get a group from all these other groups together doing covers. We're basically covering these songs, but again, they're exclusive to the horror genre. And, you know, it's a concept that I think, you know, I really would be excited to go and see myself, you know, on a Saturday night at one of the conventions. So once we kind of get the, you know, the nucleus together, you know, that's another great, you know, dream I hope to accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds amazing, because I know that especially as we said before, you attended a convention in Manchester in October, I believe, because I think it's for the love of horror.
Yeah, well, I was there.
Yeah, there was so they have kind of nights where they've started to introduce like musicians and sort of shows, and I think that the band that you mentioned, I think that would really fit in perfectly there.
Oh yeah, yeah, because what's his face from Lost Boys, the sax
Oh, I
player.
forgot his name.
Yeah, but I mean, he brought the
Tim
house down.
Capello.
Yeah, Tim Capello. Yeah, we talked for quite a while on one of the breaks, and really great guy and things. And but, you know, he gets up there and he, you know, wears the same kind of thing that he wore, you know, for that movie, and oils up his arms so it has that same sort of sweaty sheen to it. And he just works to a track, you know, music track, and plays the sax, and goes through the audience, and just, you know, I mean, they went nuts, you know, the both days that I was there. And I thought, that is so great, you know, that a musician like that, who was in the movie, and the song has kind of become iconic, you know, because of that, you know, is a very, very cool thing to see.
Absolutely. I really hope that this band sort of really sort of kickstarts and gets going, because I think it sounds like a really, really cool idea, and it was something I'd love to go and see.
Yeah, and I've been doing this, you know, the band The Sloths now, you know, pretty consistent up until COVID hit, for the last 10 years. And we were a band that, you know, started in the mid 60s. So we opened for the Doors. We opened for Iron Butterfly. We opened for the Animals, Pink Floyd, Love. I mean, pretty much all the bands of that mid 60s era that played Los Angeles, we opened for them. And there used to be a band that, wasn't known, but we always played on the same bill, called the Nas. And the lead singer of the Nas was a guy named Vincent. And, I would hang out at Frank Zappa's, house with him and stuff. Really cool guy. And he was from Texas and stuff. Alice Cooper, Vincent became Alice Cooper. So, I still have not connected with him since, I picked the songs and he, wrote Man Behind the Mask.
Mhm.
It's just been like the conventions, like, we keep missing each other and stuff. But just that irony that literally the last time I sat and talked to him was 1966. So, got a long time between, seeing one another. But, those are those things that when we took the band after all these years, almost 50 years, and all came back together, and I stopped playing rock and roll in, like, I guess 69, 70, went to Paris to study mime with Marcel Marceau to become a more visual lead singer, then found out, oh, I can actually do comedy. And then met Woody Allen and went into his movie Sleeper and worked with him on the robots of Sleeper. Then it was like all the mime training got me Jabberwocky in Alice in Wonderland, or the mutated bear in Prophecy, or Captain Star in The Black Hole. So it gave me a chance to kind of learn film by working on films as these faceless creatures of some sort. And I kept writing scripts, which eventually, led to getting, One Dark Night made. But, everybody's path is kind of different, how they get things off and going. And the fact that the band got back together after all these years, and we have a vinyl album that finally, what we wanted to do 50 years ago, we finally accomplished that dream. And we have music videos on YouTube. So if you just write in The Sloths, like the furry, cute little free-toed creatures, you can see some of those things. And, as I said, COVID kind of stopped everything. And I thought, I don't want to stop. I want to, create another band, and hopefully something that, that can play, if nothing else, just the horror conventions, but could also play other gigs too. We could certainly open for people doing songs that, are covers, but with people that you kind of either from the band they were in, or from the fact that, I directed Jason, Lives, and yet I'm up there as the lead singer. So it's, it's always trying to find a new dream, to fulfill.
That's something. I mean, I know obviously everyone, a lot of people primarily know you as the director from Friday the 13th. But for me, when I hear your story and I hear kind of your life, it's one of the most inspiring things ever, because it's like I said, I've grown up of the generation of you must have a very formal structured, go and get a 9 to 5 job, and then if you want to pursue a hobby, like just try and do it in your own time kind of thing. And it's really inspiring to hear sort of any dream you've kind of had, you've just gone for, and it's worked out great for you. So it's really inspiring, your story.
Well, I mean, what I say on stage, every performance that we did is, usually I would hold up the vinyl album and I said, it took 50 fucking years to get this made, but it is, I think, far greater having this now, because you really had to wait and try to earn it, as opposed to being able to get a record deal back in the 60s. So, the takeaway is, guys, do not give up your dreams. If you get married, you have kids, have to take a straight job, don't give it up. Just say, it's going to come. I'm going to find some way that it's going to come. I never thought this was going to happen. Basically I was 61 when this happened, and the rest of the band. And so here we got a bunch of guys in their 60s playing music from the 60s, but playing it with far more energy and, showmanship and things. The stuff I do on stage is very theatrical and throw myself into the audience. So I'm somewhere between punk, Alice Cooper, Little Kiss, because we got fire when it comes out of my hands. I do a song called Lust, and suddenly my crotch starts to smoke. I mean, just bizarre, small, little visual things. But for an audience that hasn't seen show bands, it's like, wow, they're used to bands just sitting there,
Yeah.
playing and not doing anything. So we got a lot of bookings purely because, it was like, you got to see these guys. And I jump into the audience and I sing to the audience. I dance, with the girls. I've got knee pads so that I literally can slide across the floor about 40 feet on my knees. So it's like as theatrical as I can make it, I do. And that's something that I never expected I'd be doing that in my 60s. I thought I'd be in a golf cart on a golf course going, you know what I used to do? I was in a band, I made movies. It's like, no, fuck it. No, it's like I'm shooting for 100 and I'm get as close as I can get. If I surpass that, that's great. But I literally bought a crypt at Hollywood Forever Cemetery where I shot One Dark Night. It has my nameplate up there, the year I was born, nothing for obviously when I die. A quote from Peter Pan that says, "To die will be an awfully big adventure." And people will come just to, look at that going, yeah, that's where he's going to be, and my game plan is that, every birthday I have a group of fans and friends and we all gather in front of that and I do a crypt warming, like a housewarming, but a crypt warming where we just hang out and talk for like an hour, not about death, not about that crypt, but about what you're doing, what's going on, how can we encourage each other. It's all very, very life affirming. And my crazy theory from a psychic standpoint is, if we create enough positive energy kind of in that area, my hope is wherever the hell I go, I leave some sort of residual energy in the same way when there's been a murder in a place and you walk in and you go, wow, that's weird. Or you go into your grandma's house and you go, it's like I can still feel her. You do. You still feel that energy. To me, that's what ghosts are. That's what spirits are. They're not some scary thing. They're residual energy that somehow certain people can see. And it's like, positive, negative energy. You have to have one and the other, and then something manifests. Sound, feeling, look, smell, could be any number of things. Certain people are very attuned to that, and others like, what are you fucking talking about? I don't feel anything. But I want to keep this, the show goes on even after I'm gone. And people go, well, you're not going to know. And I go, but I know right now. I'm excited right now about the concept. So if I'm gone someplace and I don't see it, it's okay. If I set it up and it works, that's my kind of excitement at this point. That wouldn't that be great if I did something that sort of is on the psychic experimental thing, because we don't know that much about the psychical sciences yet. And in the same way, if I showed this to you, 20, 30 years ago, you say, are you fucking what? Holy shit, there's a movie in there. How are you doing that? To me, this is far more advanced, and we only use like 15% of it. So there's a whole bunch of things that we just haven't got yet. And to me, I won't be here for some of those breakthroughs, but it'd be cool to certainly be gone, but still be part of it for somebody else. So that's, my sort of insane way of thinking, which is why when Joe Maudry did this book on me, he called it A Strange Idea of Entertainment, from my quote from the movie. And it pretty much is it. When you read through the book, it's like all the weird things. It's like Forrest Gump. I didn't plan a life like this. It just sort of happened. I just happened to know somebody and went to Monterey Pop Festival. And it happened because the person was the son of Henry Mancini, that we were in the front row and saw Hendrix and Janis Joplin and The Who and all these people that I idolized, and seeing them live and for the first time. I mean, those little things, hanging with Jim Morrison because we were in a band that opened for them, and kind of getting that feeling that he's somebody that something's going to happen with, you could just kind of sense it. And all those wonderful life experiences that kind of just happen kind of along the way. And Joe said, we got to put all that down, with all the movies and the influences in the movies from your life. Have you thought about it? I said, no, I'm always doing this. I don't want to look backwards. And it was very sobering, kind of go back and start getting nostalgic about stuff. And it's like, yeah, whatever happened to that person? Or, gee, that movie should have done better, or whatever. Because I didn't want to think about it. I wanted to think about, the next thing. So, and the ultimate thing, like it or not, we're going to die. So you might as well embrace it as opposed to be afraid of it. And if it comes faster than my plan, nothing I can do about that, but at least I know where I'm going to live or rest. And God willing, I don't get blown up in an airplane and there's nothing but, cinders, but still, it'll sit there as a memorial, I guess. But, it's just, I have a very, positive approach to death, that it should not be something to be afraid of. It should be something that kind of look forward to, but don't want to hurry it, because there's too many things to do here, too many great people. My fear is losing the people that I love and having to deal with that loss, not so much me, or the fact that my son and daughter are going to feel awful, when their dad's gone, because I know what that felt like when my dad and my mom left. That's sort of the pain of the people you leave behind. But you do want, to me, to somehow look forward to whatever that mystery is. And depending on your belief system, I don't know if that's what you get or you're not, we don't know, right?
That's it. Endless possibilities, really. I mean, things way beyond our comprehension. That's kind of the beautiful thing about it. And I think for me, that's kind of like the peace that I find with that kind of stuff, is that no one ever knows. I don't believe it is just the end. I think there is something, but I don't think we could even comprehend what it could be. So,
in the same way we, the cell phones and computers, all that, how could we think about the possibilities? And that's just a start. I mean, every year something new comes out, and they keep advancing. As you know, if you're a techie person, whatever you just bought is already obsolete, because they got the other one waiting to come out the next year, and you go, oh shit, that one has a better camera. That is because it's just going like crazy. It's such an incredible age of discovery of stuff that we never ever imagined.
No, I mean, we're even way ahead now than what sort of the public have access to. There's so many things that we can do now, and world's moving very quick, and I think you just got to kind of ride along with it, I suppose.
Yeah. I teach film too at Chapman University, film classes, and I've got all these students who are like in their late teens and early 20s, and it's exciting to me to see where they're going to go. A few of them have already gone on to becoming filmmakers or directors in television, or working for Pixar or whatever, kind of all over the place. But it's like I'm trying to get them to realize that your chance of making it is 1 in a million, but you're that one, and you got to think that, and you can't let it go, no matter what. If it doesn't happen on your watch, it's going to happen if you want it and you keep striving. So don't let them tell you the one horrible word that you hear in this industry all the time: no. Did you read my script? Yeah, but no. And it's going to keep happening, and you have to somehow go, okay, I hear you, thank you, watch this, and go to the next one. And then somebody at some point will say yes, or they will find you and say, are you the one with that script? Somebody told me. You don't know. I mean, but you got to somehow be in the casino playing, some, I don't know, roulette, and have somebody tap you on the shoulder and tell you just won on 21 back here. It's like, I'm not even playing 21. No, well, you're in the casino. They just said you did. Come on, it's kind of like you have to stay kind of in and around it. But if you can't, you can always go back to it. And I've known so many actors and directors and writers that they had a whole life and a whole family and a whole thing, and then went, what am I going to do now? Well, let me go back and start working in this direction. And lots of times it's just the pleasure of doing it. The bands, you make no money. In fact, you lose money being in a band, because you got to pay for rehearsals. Usually you got to pay for the costs on the road. You play in a club with 3 other bands, you split that money. I mean, if you break even, that's a win. So you don't do that for the money, and you don't have a band nowadays to make hit songs, unless you're Adele or you're, what's her name, Taylor Swift, or some of the, the mainstream. And even they are like doing the shit in their own home and then releasing it themselves and getting it out immediately. So there's really no place to really be a huge financial success unless you get into that upper echelon. But the joy of just doing it, of knowing that, it's making people happy and you're enjoying it and you can still do it, is great. And as I said, it came at a point when me and all the rest of these jokers should be retired, and hanging out with their grandchildren, but kind of didn't happen that way. So, I as I said, I really encourage anybody out there, just if you love to write, if you love the sculpture, if you anything, whatever it is, find time to kind of do it, keep it going so you feel like I'm still in the craft. And then at some point, some opportunity will come up. And I said, I wasn't even looking for it. I just knew that dream wasn't fulfilled and I wanted it to be.
That's amazing. No, like I said, this is exactly why I love doing these interviews, is being able to put out the words from people like yourself. And my goal hopefully with this is that somebody can listen to this and sort of decide, I'm gonna push the thing that they love, whatever that is in life, So I want to thank you for those words that you've said and the life experience. And thank you so much for joining us today, Tom.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure talking to you. And, thank you guys for being supportive of the movie all these years, and get a chance to pick up the book, Strange Idea of Entertainment. It's on Amazon. I don't make any money on it, of course. It all goes to the publisher. But I think, you'll find some very interesting stories of things that happen on these movies, making the movies, and just all the fascinating aspect of life, looking at it through, a lens and trying to, recreate that in some fashion.
Thank you. I'll make sure I'll add all your links down in the description so people can go and follow you on social medias and your band's website as well and things like that.
Well, the Sloths are www.thesloths.org. So you can kind of see the videos and photos and hear the songs and all the rest of that. And then I have a TommyMcloughlin.com one too, that at the moment it takes you right to my Facebook, but I'm not great at that doing all that stuff. I've got to get somebody to walk me through it, but that's pretty much the other place to go. Or just put Tom Mcloughlin or Tommy Mcloughlin in YouTube, and there's so many interviews and all this stuff. Most everything, of course, is about Friday, but there's some that are about the Stephen King. Sometimes they come back. There's some that are about Date with an Angel. There's, it's all kind of all over the place there. So that's where you probably see the most material.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. God bless.